Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
The coaching side of things, it's been great, to be honest. Some of the guys I work with have just been unbelievable in their I suppose their interest in looking at a completely different way of working, you know, without it becoming I got to hit balls into a net in the back garden kind of thing, you know, which is the default go-to. And, you know, from some conversations, it was very quickly, we were saying, look, there's major gains to be made here on behavioral things. There's major gains to be made here on process things. And yeah, of course, hit your golf balls if you want and work on something technical if you feel, but let's make sure that that's not the first port of call and the only port of call, you know. And some of the guys have been unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable how they've embraced it. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, as you said, it's the kind, you're right, Donald, it's the kind of thing that you'd love to work with players on, and you may have had it earmarked of things to work with players on, but you'd never have gotten this time with this, nothing else going on.
Like, that's the thing that I've been shocked at the most at, and I suppose I was excited to talk to you about today, was I can't believe how open and engaging the players have been in working in different modes now. Like, I think obviously they're all great people and stuff, and they all want to work, but it's so easy in golf because we have such access to great facilities to train in a specific way. Like I've had players that I've asked to do imagery work and visualization work before, embrace it, write out scripts, stuff that they would never have done before. You know what I mean? Like, they would have laughed at me. They'd go, "Oh yeah, don't want to get on to that."
Yeah.
And it's been kind of like that. Yeah, like I've definitely tried as much as possible to shield them away from going out into technical, visual looking rabbit holes as much as possible, because.
And the interesting thing is, like, some of the stuff that some of the guys are doing, it's leading them back to something technical, but now it's leading them back there with a different perspective, and there's a massive why behind why they're doing it, as opposed to, well, I'm just doing it because I've always done this, and I'm doing it because, well, everyone else is doing it, and what else am I to do? It's just changed. It's changed the purpose in a big way, which is great.
A couple of the players I sort of tested this with after our chat with Martin Donald. I said they were hitting balls in their net out the back, and just they are again replying, you know, I feel like this is a waste of time. So I said, don't hit a shot unless you bring your on-course routine to it every time down to the exact second. And I used Tiger Woods' one, for example. There's a video of him. I think you might have posted it. He was 2 shots back to back, and it was down to the second exactly how his routine went into each shot. And I said, I try to do it and try and nail the time each time. And they couldn't. They were getting like 3, 4, 5 seconds apart. And I was like, well, get that down. And then their routine and their practice session at the back just went from being an hour bored hitting balls to 20 minutes really productive. And they were, I was like, see, just a little bit of thinking, and you can get a lot out of your session. But on that, Ed, how do your behavioral patterns in a time like this to practice your performance or practice how you're going to improve when there's sort of limited resources? How would you go about getting your players to do that?
Well, I suppose the big thing around any behaviors is that they are like psychologists have been telling us for decades that your current day behavior is merely a fingerprint from the past. So there are behaviors now in April 2020 are maybe actually behaviors that got started in their teens, even before their teens, that they've never managed to shift or challenge sufficiently to ask, is this actually a helpful behavior or not? Like, where has this come from? So I think that's one of the things that a lot of that type of retrospective coaching stuff can offer a player, is that to go back to those seminal moments in your life, first and foremost, but then also in your sport, golf being the chat that we're on, that actually makes you realize, good grief, that's why I think this way when I am in a situation like that, because I can actually link it back to that time when I was in a boys' event and something similar happened and I never really dealt with it properly, and so that you actually go back, because we have time, you go back and you actually, you identify those behaviors that they have now, and try and track back, well, where did they come from, and how are they so resilient now? Why is it so hard for you to change this behavior now? Even though we may have discussed in the past that, gee, this isn't a helpful behavior, this is catching you out, be that in the last 9 holes on a Friday when you're going for the cut, when you're trying to make the cut, or the first 9 holes on a Thursday when you're just, you know, starting off in a tournament, or where are these thoughts? Where's that narrative coming from that's leading to that type of a behavior that may be a destructive behavior, let's say? And also the flip around, those really positive, strong behaviors, where did that come from? Wow, let's go back and really highlight that time and really double down on that thinking and double down on that behavior, you know? I read a bit like that. I saw a term there a couple of years ago called sundoku. It's a Japanese term I'd never come across before, but it's a term that says, it's a term that describes, I think, now it could have been a piss take, but I think it's a term that describes a collection of all the books you have that you've never read. Right? And I got to, when COVID-19 broke out, I kind of all of a sudden had, I don't know where the name came back into my head, the word came back to my head, and I look over to the corner of a room and I'm like, oh my God, I've actually never even started some of those books. And 2 of those books that I've now since started and finished in this time period were The Power of Moments, which is just an unbelievable book. It's been sitting in my house for years, but it's an unbelievable book about actually how to magnify important moments in a person's or a player's or an athlete's or a business person, whatever, their life, to actually, so that they actually become really important, potent times for them, you know? And the other one is a book.
Let me write that one down.
There's the other one is a book called Art Thinking, by a woman, Amy Whitaker. And again, just a brilliant book for looking at something in through more than just one lens, you know?
Yeah.
That a bit like you were saying there, Donal, you know, to try and encourage people not just to go after the technical. We know it's sport. I can't think of a sport that's not technically engaged, you know? They are. So sports by their nature, it's if it's a sport, it means that there's some skill involved. If there's a skill involved, then it means there's some technical element to it. But so we know the importance of that. We know the benefits that can be gained from making changes or trying to change or whatever. But it's just to try and encourage people away from that as being the only approach or their first maybe port of call, you know? And this book, Art Thinking, it's just a very smart book, really easy to read, but a very smart book on getting people to think a little bit differently, to make sure that they look at something not just with the way they normally look at, but maybe go around the backside and have a look from another angle, and maybe from down up or down or up down, or, and it's just, again, it speaks back to that idea of trying to encourage this, using this time to maybe look at behaviors that were maybe not as helpful as they could have been or should have been, or maybe, again, I think it's something I think we even spoke about, Donal, when we first met in UCD that day, the perception of an athlete compared to what the actual reality is for them, you know? Oh, I'm a really good putter. And then you look at their stats, you're like, you're not that great.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about that is kind of reminds me, but is I've had to work in this a lot in my own coaching. It's like trying not to label things good or bad. So like, you know, well, that's bad technique, that's good technique, that's, you know, because I've definitely learned, especially with good players, most things perform a function of some sort. Like, you know, maybe a certain move, it's performing a function of, it's saving them from something. I might need to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what that function is, but, and I was just going, you know, when you spoke about behaviors there, I kind of think that maybe some behaviors, and especially if you do the regressive stuff, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on, would be even they must be serving a function of some sort, whether it's to protect them from something that hurt them in the past, so they get real closed off and defensive, wrap themselves in a bubble, and how important is it to go back and figure out what that function is and have you had any success doing that, or etc.? Basically, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's huge. Like the again, in the world of psychology, and I'm not a psychologist. It has a big impact, obviously, in skill acquisition. But but Maslow's needs model speaks unbelievable. Everything we do because it's serving some function for us.
Yeah.
That might be to express a part of our ego that we like to show out there to others, but it might also be to hide behind something and protect our ego. I do not want to find myself in contention because I have a lot of experiences where I didn't capitalize on that, and I don't want to get into that position again where I might fail again. So there's a behavior that would come in to again almost get me out of that situation, or the other way around. Oh, if I'm not anywhere near contention, I'm just gonna, doesn't matter, because then I can. I'm only good when I'm in contention. I can only, I need to have stress or pressure to turn it on. That's another protecting behavior, because it's feeding a need. We all our needs, and again, down to the very serious needs of life and death stuff of, your needs. You need food, you need water, you need shelter, you need, these kind of things. But then it expands hugely into then, when you have all of those things, there are then other needs that emerge. What are your needs, and again, that's a huge part to play from that coach-athlete relationship, to make sure, like you were saying there, to try and work as a coach so that your own needs or biases don't infect the environment of where the coach is, and that's tricky.
Yeah, and I thought you were working on that a lot.
That leads me on to the question there how do you get your players to that scenario where they go back to their behavioral patterns? For argument's sake, let's say someone who chokes under pressure quite often and he feels like he can't compete because of it. How do you get them into that environment before they to practice and train in that? Like, obviously, we talked about, you can use money, you can use giving away your phone, but for a guy, you work with a couple of high quality players who, playing for €20 doesn't get them into that exact zone all the time. How would you get them there?
Yeah, I think again, this kind of goes back to a chat that Donal and I had a while back, where we were talking just about that practice space, that space where you can simulate as much as you possibly can for the athlete. But I like what you were saying there, as far as, that won't work for some of those players. Anytime I go engage in that environment where I am loading it with a consequence to create that pressure situation, especially if it is somebody who you're thinking, you know what, they've been hurt in this space before, so I've got to get them back to that place where now they actually want to get into that space. They don't want to go away from it. They actually want to get back into that place. And there's quite a lengthy process goes behind that. But in short, it will always come from the athlete. I've never done a session with a player where the consequences are something that I want them to have as a consequence, but they haven't agreed. They'll always agree to it. And in fact, the best consequences and the best pressure situations are the ones that they come up with themselves, where it's that, a bit of give and take. Well, I'd like this. All right, is that really an accurate representation of it? Well, it kind of is. Well, how can we make it a better representation of it, and so on and so forth. And again, it's to go back into that idea of, if it's a consequence that they have bought into themselves, because the money, as you said, money isn't an issue. Phone is an issue. For some people, for some people, you have to go quite deep to try and find out what it is that trigger that makes them think, oh my God. And it might be, you can't watch Home and Away for a week. I don't know, but once you find it, then you just get out of the way, because once you've found that personal, specific thing, that trigger, stand back. Literally, coach, get out of the way, because then they'll go back to that childlike place where they will just get lost in the process of the task. I've my two boys. I hear them outside in the garden. They are in All-Ireland finals on a daily basis. Like they're in Wembley playing an FA Cup final for Liverpool on a daily basis. They're scoring points, so with their hurls off, and you hear them, and he wheels around, and Coughlan takes the point off his weak side, and it's total immersive environment. We can get adults, elite level amateurs, professional level golfers, or just any golfers, any age and stage, to get into that space if we take our time to probe and provoke a little bit to find out what actually will get them into that place where they totally get into it,
That can be very small. When I was a few years ago, I was probably 19 or 20. We were playing for a point of red lemonade, which is like 50 cents, and we were killing each other to try and win. And it was definitely the closest I ever came to training in an environment, because I just never wanted to lose to the friends. We're like, we loved each other, we got on great, but playing for a red lemonade, lose our boys to red lemonades, and none of us wanted to lose. And it was a great feeling. And get a little 3-footer to win. You felt it a little bit, because I don't want to lose this. That he's going to give me a bit of grief, and I'm going to have to buy him a red lemonade.
And just on the process of it, Ed, right? So, like I've had the opportunity to chat to lots of coaches and stuff over the last little while. I think we've all been. I know I've been in that space where I've had some unbelievable sessions where, and as a result of our conversation back at UCD, and it's definitely like been a huge influence on my coaching, is like trying to bring the players like that sense of play, that sense of like competitiveness out in them in a training environment. But I've also felt the flip side where, and I've made a mistake. It's usually one of two things. I've rushed into it, and I haven't done my work on the context initially before we begin the session. I haven't laid out the how to put it, the behaviours and values piece as much as the score piece in the task. And then maybe I haven't deconstructed it afterwards as well as I could have done, or we haven't done the reflection piece as well as possible, where it could have been one where it was a really challenging task for them. You could see it bringing out a lot of emotion in them. They're getting frustrated. They're feeling like they're failing. And you're almost just so happy that they completed it. Get out of there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're just like, oh, thank God for that. Thank God that's over. Let's go. Do you know what I mean? Let's go do something different. And I'd love some guidance on the lead in, the during, and the after, basically.
Well, on that, that's a great one, because we've all been there. We've all been in those situations where you think, and even the ones, sometimes it's the ones where you've done so much pre-work beforehand, you've just gotten in your own way. And this is just going to be the most amazing session ever. And you're like, oh my God, this is absolutely dying. And they don't have the heart to tell me, Ed, this is shit. And we're just kind of slowly drowning. I'll go to a good friend of mine, Stu Morgan, right? And who both you guys will know of. And Stuart will always speak to the score. He said, in all the years he's working with in golf, from all his years in the States working with Ledbetter, and all the time now he's back in Europe, and he's working with Wiesberger and a couple of the other guys. He said he's never met a golfer who doesn't know their score. He said, and not only do they know their score, they know the score of everyone they're playing with. You could ask them on the 11th fairway, where are you? 2 under. How are you going with the others? He's 1 under. He's 2 over. They know, because they're so locked into the score, and he speaks, he'll always speak. He said, no matter what I'm doing with the players, he said, I'll always make sure it comes back to that one thing that they know, the score. It's a scoring sport, Your score is paramount. We grow up around golf where as soon as you come off the 18th, what you shoot. It's like, and if you shot millions, you're trying to go out over the wall of the place, so you don't have to go through the car park, so you don't have to meet anybody. Like you're literally hiding your clubs in the bush to come back and get them later on, because you don't want to meet anybody. Because we're so attached to score, And that for me has helped me kind of, it's almost like a checklist. What's that checklist that I'm doing? Yes, I'll spend a lot of time in that context. Yeah, I'll make sure that it is going after a behavior that we feel is maybe destructive or whatever. There are times it'll be going after something technical that they'll have been working with their swing coach. That it's something, okay, our conversation between me, the player, and their coach would be like, okay, look, this is something we're working on. Can you put that under pressure? Can you have a look at it? Great. So that gives that a little bit of context and whatever. But it will always come back to, is there a score in here somewhere? And their consequence might be something crazy or whatever else, but it's still going to come back to that scoring. And I think that has changed some of the way I've devised or co-created, because I try and involve the players as much as possible, those type of sessions, so that it always comes back to score. Are you under par for this? Are you that up and down? How important is that? Because if that's an up and down for a bogey, or is that up and down for a birdie? Because you know what I mean? Yeah. They're very different things on the card because it impacts on the score so much, you know? And I think that's been a big part. But the other side of it is for me is, if I try and keep it in sequence to what happens on the course, and this can be quite tricky at times, but it's to make sure that they don't get lost in, especially when they're working with me. They'll be doing other things with other maybe people in their team, but it is that time where the sequence of it, that I've got an approach shot, I maybe have a little chip and run or a pitch, but then I have to finish off the sequence, you know, so that I have that association. And again, because we do that, like if we went to watch a football match and they came straight out onto the pitch and played, and then at halftime lined up and started shaking hands with each other, we'd be like, that's not right. That doesn't look right. And then before they left the pitch, did a warm-up before going in for halftime, you'd be like, it just wouldn't sequence. It would actually ruin the sequence for what there's a process. There's almost a parade that we like. We enjoy. We buy into it. You know, there's something that happens before this that leads to that leads to the next, that leads to the next. You know, golf is incredibly sequential. You know, you'll never be on the fairway unless you've been on a tee box. So I think sometimes we lose sight of that sequence when we get into the practice space, you know, and that's why then the ideal is to try and practice as much as possible on a course where there are actual holes set up. And it's not about hitting multiple balls on the golf course, because I don't think, again, number one, it's not favorable. It's not liked by the course management and so on, and understandably. But it's actually that you're working, you can intensify the sequence that really reflects what they'll actually experience in the game, you know, and when they're actually competing.
Does that go back? I read about it. There's another thing I wanted to ask you about, but I'll go back to that later. Would you go and incorporate in your sessions, say, for argument's sake, you can't get onto the course? Obviously, priority is the course. I've seen, it might have been Stuart, I can't remember, it was a performance coach anyway, but all of his sessions are based on changing the club every shot. So the first shot, you're almost playing the course. I know Faldo did it before he won his last Masters title, that he went to the range down the road and acted out every hole as his warm-up. Like this guy, I think it was a Stuart, I can't remember who it was, but he said, you hit your driver and we have a look, and then you have to go on to, you might have sliced it a bit 30 yards right of the fairway, and you're playing the first hole in Stackstown, for argument's sake, you have all right, now you have a shot where the ball's above your feet, and you have to try and control this into the green. Is that how you'd go about doing it on the range, or?
Yeah. Well, I think that's, again, you're trying to, like what we say, high fidelity environments. That sounds like you're trying your best to cope with the fact that you can't get on the course, which is it's a better thing. And again, even the things you said there, if you're saying to a player, okay, you've hit that a little bit left, so your next shot is now, so it's slightly above your feet, and so small little things that you can then, even if you're in a bay, you know, even if you're in a range where you're in a bay and it's not even on grass, you might then say, well, look, this shot it's got to be a high lofted shot, because this approach, you've got to go over that those set of trees or that bunker. The more that context that you're doing, and you give them, you create a corridor for them that they're working at. A guy I spoke to recently, and like, I'm actually annoyed that I haven't spoken to this guy before, is Dean Robertson. He's the head of golf.
Yeah, I know Dean really well. In Stirling, he's a lovely guy.
Oh man alive, the insights, like this man has forgotten more about golf than I'll probably ever know, you know. Like, he's a former tour player, world-class putter in his time on tour. He's a great, like, you know, I think he played in the World Cup of Golf against Woods and Duval for Scotland, and just an unbelievable knowledge of the game, but also his history within the game was very much based around the traditions and the cultures of that time. It was more and more balls. How many balls can you hit in a week kind of thing? And now to see and hear how he now coaches, it's just an unbelievable
transition.
It's unbelievable transition and appreciation, because it's not that he's against technique. He's not. He can coach the golf swing, but he's now built in that understanding and appreciation that there's a lot more other things that we can actually work on as well, you know. And he has spoken, like in the conversations I had with him recently, he speaks to that idea that you're talking about, the context, the layers that he would put on, because they have quite a small facility in Stirling, I understand. And yet how he maximizes that little facility that they have on campus, it's unbelievable. He said, like, he'll talk about creating a corridor that the players have to hit a certain shot down, you know. He'll talk about kind of TrackMan numbers that he sent me on, some lovely things around, well, that's now with glass. And when I asked him, what does that mean with glass? He said, well, there's a pane of glass all down the left-hand side. So it can't go beyond that because you're going to break the glass, but it has to stay inside. And he just and I'm just on the phone and I'm like, this is creating such incredible pictures for me. I can only imagine what it must be like for players, you know? And again, he'd be the first to say, it doesn't work for each player, because some players, because of what they've had in their past, they struggle to get to a place where a coach then is not giving them very specific technical things to work on. They struggle when all of a sudden it moves into that place of analogy, pictures, context, sequencing, you know. He does, like you were saying there, Josh, you know, he does that idea of, well, we're not going to hit that shot next because you'd never hit that shot after you'd hit that one. Let's go on to another likely possible shot, or even just change up the type of shot you're going to do. Again, for me, I think it was a chat I had yesterday with a couple of the lads. For me, golf is just like tennis. It's a reaction sport. The pace of the game is slightly different, of course, because it's not being hit at you, but it's a reaction sport. If you can get into that place of, I see the shot, I react to the shot. If we can get into that place in practice by creating that lovely context around every shot, it becomes even more reactive then in practice, as opposed to just a ticking of the box type approach.
I think one of the things that definitely, like, getting to know somebody like yourself, Ed, and other guys that have brought, I think, like a whole fresh life to the way that the golf industry goes about their business. I was chatting to a friend of mine. He's involved with the Irish rugby team, and one of the nice things that I think they're doing at the minute is they're kind of looking at everything that they do and asking themselves, how much of what we do we do because we've always done it, and how much of what we do actually delivers. And I think we're slowly starting to see an inventory of the way we coach and the way we practice. And well, I know I am, and I'm sure a lot of people are. It's are we doing this because it delivers a benefit in terms of either our skill acquisition or performance acquisition, or are we doing it because just we've always done it? And I look at like practice rounds for me. Somebody that I've over the last number of years have had the opportunity to go out to tour events quite a bit and watch players going around practicing and how they're preparing. And initially I thought, that doesn't make sense. But the more I do, I'm like I was saying this to Josh, it was like, guys dropping, like, when they go on a practice round hitting 4 or 5 chips from the same spot. I'm like, well, the chances of you having a chip from the same, like, from that exact spot is ridiculous. It's never going to happen. If you do miss a green, the ball is only this big, and there's no chance you're going to have the exact same lie. Yeah. And it's like, I think that's the nice thing about, and Dean, I've been fortunate to like when he spoke about it before, he was like, he practiced beside Tiger at St Andrews, and he'd heard so much about him, and he was hitting, like, warming up on the range, and Dean is doing the thing that all other golfers were doing, which is like swing it perfect, hit it straight in my warm up, and Tiger was hitting these. He said it was like watching an artist, like, drawing shapes. He was up and around and high and low, and that was the Open he went on to win by like 10 or whatever. And I was like, there's, like, again, you know, Tiger was challenging the traditional thinking of how we should go about things. And in terms of what you've seen thus far, is there any obvious ones that jump out at you that should be challenged?
Well, I think that's a great question. And again, I'll go back to two guys who've significantly impacted my thinking in golf, was Peter Arnott and Stuart Morgan again, right? So Peter Arnott, he's again another Scot. Some of the things that he does with his players and same with is to really look at the likelihood, as you just said, what's the likelihood of this type of shot, but also to see how maybe stats can actually help, because again, we all know stats are fantastic in the right hands, but if we go after them too much, they can take us down some pretty scary dark places when you're like chasing something that doesn't even apply to you. And they've both of them have spoken how, if you miss a green, if you actually miss a green, you're far more likely to be in the rough if you miss a green than not. That's apparently what the stats say. So if you are missing, if you are up on the practice round and the like, and you're up around the green, well, and you're giving yourself this beautifully perfect lie around the green, and they're like, it's actually, the likelihood is that you're actually going to be in the rough. And he said, so then, go to those type of shots. Now, he said, the interesting thing they were saying, though, is how if you are going to those type of shots and you've realized, actually, my 5 irons, my 7 irons, my approach shots aren't great, but if you only see it in that context of, my approach shots aren't great, off the tee or around the green, I'm fine and my putting is good and so on and so forth, but my approach shots aren't great. And then you go away and work on your approach shots, you work on your irons, but you don't realize that maybe actually my approach shots are actually fine when I'm on the fairway, but it's when I'm rough they're not. But how many people will go and practice their iron play in the rough? And yet you're, but again, it's to know how to allow the stats to properly speak to the individual. It's not just your approach play. Is it your approach play from the fairway? Because if you're on the fairway, maybe you're actually all right. It's just that in tougher lies, that's when it gets a bit leaky. So how often are you in those tougher lies? And maybe on that day when your stats, or that event, or that maybe two weeks that you're looking at your data, maybe you found yourself in the rough quite a bit, which then might negatively impact on what you go away and practice. Because you might then go away and think, my approach play isn't great, and I go and work on the range, but you're working on the range probably in a very lovely good lie or off mats or whatever. And it might actually be, it's only when you're in the rough. And I think that's something that maybe, and again, as you all know, there's some world-class guys out here who get all this, but there's the rest of us who are kind of thinking, geez, I hadn't thought of it that way. Maybe I need to just, again, that perspective, that book, Art Thinking, I was on to you about, maybe if I just try and look at it from a different angle, it might actually expose a very different thing that I can go after, and make proper gains. And you're like, and all of a sudden you say, okay, our session today, we're going to work on that rough. We're going to create gains around the rough. We're also going to try and keep the sequencing in place. So we're not going to give you 10 shots out of the rough in a row and all this kind of thing, but we're going to try and put it in a sequence. We're going to put a context on it. We're going to create really realistic targets and so on and so forth. And then over a period of time, over a period of sessions, see, well, is this beginning to impact on your golf? And then over a series of events, not just one event, because as you know, the stats need power. They need sufficient numbers to be able to generate some meaningful story. But I think that's something that I've taken away from the guys. To look at that layer or two below where you may normally just look at, Yeah,
definitely. One of the things I've done or realized, one of the coming at it from another angle that this time has given me, was just a friend of mine, Mark Sweeney, over in the States, and he's a data analyst with a big background in the game. He invented using your feet to read green through point and all. But we were looking at things, and I think I've gotten stats back. I think I've gotten stats backward my whole career. And what I mean by that is, I used to always tell players, go collect a little stats and then come back and we look at it, instead of using the stats to create realistic targets and define our strategy when we play. So if, for example, one of the things that Mark's done, which has been taking all the data and analyzing it, he can say he's created actionable stats that players can play to. So for example, somebody tells me a negative strokes gained approach, and kind of like what I think Peter and Stuart are saying is, okay, well, that's lovely to know, but now what? Why are you negative strokes gained approach? And so for example, we can kind of say with good certainty, if you want to if you want to win a PGA Tour event, you need to average 5 birdies around. If you want to shoot, like in the 60s, you need to have between 7 and 8 approach shots inside 20 feet per round. You need to have between 2 and 3 inside 8 feet. You need to, on your short game shots inside 50 yards, you need to get about 50% of them inside 6 feet. That's what we can say with, like, over thousands and thousands and thousands of data points. The beautiful thing about that, and you need to probably to shoot low enough to win a tour event, you probably need to hit somewhere between 12 and 14 greens around. And the thing that I always had backwards was I was letting talent players go play for like 3 or 4 weeks and come back and we'll look at it and then do that again. But I was never actually going, okay, right, our goal, like you said, the score. Okay, our goal is to shoot something in the 60s. To do that, right, your challenge today is, let's go. I want to see if you can get 5 birdies. I want to see if you can get 7 or 8. I want to see 7 or 8 opportunities inside 20 feet. Could we get 14 greens today? And it would almost like that. It's like designing a performance, and players would be so much engaged in their stats then because they'd be like that sense of like a swimmer hitting their split times.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I like that. There's two paradigm
shift for me.
Yeah, there's 2 terms that jump out at me that I really like. One, actionable stats. So for me, that speaks to, you've got to make sure they're personalized. Yeah. Because that can create a very global picture, but if they haven't been reduced down to that individual person, they'll never make sense to them. The other one then is the probably. You probably need to this, because again, we have to have that little bit of openness when it comes to stats. We have to, that if you are, as you were saying there, if you are looking at stats with that probably in your head, you're more than likely, you're probably going to get a lot more out of the stats than if you have to have this, and you have to. That's crazy. So the probably gives you that freedom to allow the player then to maybe explore and find out what actually works for them, because maybe their game is, we know guys who are just unbelievable putters. So maybe their game, that the stats around putting maybe don't apply in the same way for them. 100%. So theirs goes in another part of the game. But I think if you can, if like that, now those 2 things, if you're talking about stats and you're thinking of actionable stats, that's a great start, because that speaks to the stats informing the practice and personalizing them. But also if you have that, if you have that critical probably in there, it can also just take a little bit of the, I suppose, unnecessary pressure, because we've 3 of us have spoken at different times about pressure is really important in practice, but it's got to be a pressure that's appropriate to that person. We don't want them chasing after something that's it's a crazy stuff.
One that me and Josh have actually spoken about before a lot is like how expectation. So, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. How expectation, reasonable or otherwise, influences both, the ability to execute on a skill and then the ability to perform. So, for example, let's say you have a guy and he has a shot. How would his behavior or application of the skill differ if let's say you've got 2 guys from 150 yards, right? One guy believes it's only a good shot if it's inside 5 feet. The other guy believes it's a good shot if it's this is a good outcome here is if I get this inside 20 feet, let's say, right? How does that variable expectation or definition of positive outcome influence their behavior and then their application of the skill, in your opinion?
Yeah, brilliant question. It's come up a lot actually over the last while. For me, expectation, again, like that, is a very personal thing. If the intended shot, if the expectation is that this is inside 10 feet, and if it's not inside 10 feet, you don't think it's as good a shot as it should have been. It's a very personal thing. Expectation for me should, in one sense, be let off the leash. Go, have as high expectations as you like, so long as you back it up with world-class acceptance. If you can't let it go, don't saddle up, because you will never be able to move on if you can't accept that your expectations aren't going to follow through on what you'd hoped all the time. And I think we go back over, I'm a different generation to you young bucks, but I remember growing up watching live footage of duels with Nicholas and Watson and the like. And it's amazing. You go back and you see old footage of that because Sky Sports are doing old footage and old duels and stuff. And you realize they were amazing, whatever else. But you remember you remember thinking, oh, they held everything that day. And it was amazing. No, they didn't. But did they stay in the game? Oh my word, did they stay in the game? Like the classic one is the Nicholas Watson Open when Watson beat him. It was unbelievable golf, but also it was strewn with, shots that no doubt they were thinking, oh, I would hope to have gotten better there, closer there. But by the time they got up to the next shot, had they left that behind? Clearly, because their behavior was just this consistent, focused, it was unbelievable to watch. There was no tantrums. It was, oh yeah, I'm Jack Nicklaus. I expect to get this within 8 feet from here. And it goes to 15 feet. Okay, I expect to hold this from here. I don't hold it, so it's a 2-putt. Next tee box. I've forgotten about the one that didn't go to 8 feet, and I've forgotten about the 15-footer that I missed. I'm now on. And as again, this is going to a recent chat we had. Peter Arnott said, are the world's best players or athletes of any sport, are they, and I wrote it down here to remind me just when you mentioned this, are they all irrational optimists? And I was like, that's brilliant, because they probably are, because of how they choose to remember. There's a famous press conference that we spoke about the other day that Nicholas had one time when a journalist asked him, oh, Jack, that little putt that you missed, that 4-footer you missed on the 14th. And Nicholas was like, no, I didn't.
That never happened.
He's like, but I think it was the 4-footer on the 14th. He's like, no, I have no recollection of that. And he kind of just stared him down, and all of a sudden there's kind of a ripple of a giggle around the press room, because he was like, I'm not letting that back in here. Are you kidding? That doesn't go in here. I'll deal with that when I'm away from the course, and I'll go back and I'll work. But it was basically saying, I'm still in the event here. I don't miss put.
Perfect example was the 18th in Troon. You're talking about that with Watson. Well, Nicholas carved one into the hedge on the right-hand side, packs an iron down to 50 feet, cans the putt, and then he puts the pressure on Watson's 3-footer. And even Seve Ballesteros at the Masters had a 4-putt, and the reporter says to him, how did you 4-putt that green? He says, I hit my first putt and I missed, hit my second I missed, hit my third I missed, and I made my 4th one.
It's so true, though.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And
like, again, you speak to Seve. I grew up going to the Irish Open with my dad, so I was really fortunate to actually see him in the flesh, and on some of our unbelievable courses here in Ireland, Portmarnock and the like, and you're watching, and it's only now, I don't know if I appreciate it then, but you're looking back and you're like, his expectations must have been off the charts on shots. And like, I think there's even one of the caddies tour tales that was out there recently. One of his caddies was like, Seve, yeah, you can't do this. He said, what do you mean? I'm Seve. So his expectation, and it was really, and the caddy said, it was like, I got the look from him, basically like, how dare you even doubt that I can't get this shot? Don't put doubt in my mind over the shot, So his expectations must have been off the charts, but they were able to be consistently off the charts, because I'd say his acceptance was just on another level. He was able to let it go.
That's a really good point. That's perfect, because I always think of expectance and acceptance as on a seesaw, and I never thought of the two of them rising together. I was always like, so many times, we see some great performances when they have a really terrible preparation and practice rounds, and I always think it's because, well, maybe the acceptance has gone up and the expectation has gone down, and I'd never thought of it before. And you're 100% right. There's nothing to say that the two can't rise together, and that's like the perfect scenario, and that's almost where, because I always thought of it as a seesaw, but it makes complete sense that the two of them could come up together.
I like what you say there about how, if I don't play well, and then my practice run is not going well, and all of a sudden I play well. we see that all the time in sport. We see that all the time. We've said, like, growing up watching the Five Nations, which is now the Six Nations in the rugby. You're watching Ireland, you know, years gone by, and even recently, you know, not that recent, but you know, Ireland were playing against France a number of years ago, and I think they were something like 44-0 down at halftime or something. A joke. They get it back to within 5 points, but still lose. You know, you're like, well, come out in the second half. If you've absolutely been tonked, you're literally then just throwing anything at it, and some things will come off, and you get a little bit of, you know what I mean? That you were 44-0 down, so it's a bit like then, you know, those players who again almost fool themselves. If only you could play with like this every day, you know, and you're like, well, the reason you played well for the back nine on the on the Sunday is because you were out of the tournament, you know. So then you just threw caution to wind. So can you practice that? But we don't tend to practice that. We don't tend to look for the clues that a more freer self tells us and shows us, you know. We tend to think, oh, that was just that day, and oh, sure, everything fell for me. And like, well, there's a reason everything fell for you, and there was a reason. So what is that? What are the clues that your best golf is actually leaving there for you to pick up on? Very often we don't. Oh, that was just one of those days, and you're like, oh.
Would you sink that down to acceptance? If the players, because they're out of the tournament, they don't care where it goes, so they accept that if it goes bad, it's fine, and then they start flagging it. And if we can get players to think like that going into every shot, where they accept the bad result, their good shots will get a lot better. Yeah,
well, I think like anything else, there's a full circle here. That feeds into their practice too. They have to, and again, like I like some of the guys that you know I work with. I've gotten them used to. For some of the guys, used to finishing a session on a missed putt, finishing a session on a failed task. Okay, we're done. Yeah, but can I just let me do it again? No. You don't get to do it again. I know, but like we're only like it's early. I know it's early, but the task was the following. You failed the task, and we go home. This is the exact same feeling you're having on you know. But I said, what would you normally do in an event if you finish poorly? I'd go to the range. I'd try and find something, and no, you don't become a bad golfer in one round or one hole or one. You know what I mean? So no. Now let's deal with the behavior that's telling you. And again, Maslow's needs. I need to finish on a good one. I need to finish
on 100 million times. 100 million times. And that was kind of the last question. I suppose certainly the last question, because I appreciate your time. And I'm looking forward. I'm doing the webinar at 1 with.
Oh yeah, Rick.
Yeah, very excited about that. But the question I had for you was, we train. I find it in golf. We train technique. We train movement. We train maybe some skills, but we don't train values, right? But we talk about them all the time. So we go like, well, like you describe your ideal golfer. Oh, they're resilient, they've got they're super acceptant. They're in the moment, and they never give up. All that kind of stuff. So, in your experience, do you have a process around how you go and train or elicit these values in players, or is it ad hoc in the moment that you find a lot of coaching? Obviously, some of it's process. Someone's finding those lovely little moments and pockets of space that we know how this is a beautiful opportunity to find something right here. But I'd just be interested to hear your approach to that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when we're talking about values, for me, the obvious representation of a person's values is their behavior. So how they present themselves and what they do in certain situations and how they cope and so on and so forth. So that leads me down that path of kind of inquisition around the behaviors. Where's that coming from? What you know, at the end of a round and in an event, whatever, you have a chat and you're like, you know, we've seen that before. What? Well, that behavior when, you know, you're doing okay and you have a bogey and all of a sudden your game kind of leaves you because one bad hole. It's like, oh, well, I can't now, you know, and I want to know where that narrative is coming from. What are your values about yourself that are leading to that type of behavior. So let's, again, it goes back to that. Let's go and find that. Let's go chase that one for a while. The other one, as far as finding out how did they come about and whatever, that's probably come from a pretty painful process of me learning how to shut up. I know in my early days as a coach, I've very much coached the way I was coached. So I had this idea that I'm the coach, so I must have all the answers, and let's answer the question that I just asked, because you know what? I want to show that I have all the answers, and it's just so much stuff does not get revealed when you do that. So and I have written down here, shut up, Ed. It's constantly remind myself just to maybe set something in motion, maybe put something out there, just even a comment at lunch. Let's just see where that goes, and then just step back and see, is there, again, that values, does that trigger something? Does that cause something? Does that reveal something about this player? Or, and then you keep layering that on in the different environments that you're in with them, because the idea of letting them show them to you is something I did not do in my early years coaching. It was far too, I was far too present present. I was all over the session. I was all over the session, as opposed to, no, my job now that I see is, my job is just to perturb, manipulate, mess with the environment, with the athlete, to try and see, can things get exposed in there, and the values come out pretty quickly when I go into that place. And I think that helps me then get to that place where we were talking earlier about that perception versus reality. There's a lot of golfers and a lot of athletes, their perception of how good they actually are and where they're good compared to the reality of it, that's something that I'm not too sure gets dealt with often enough, which again, when you bring it up, you'll see their values coming out, because you'll see their behaviors emerging, which will tell you, that's a bit of a sore point. So you thought you were better than you actually were in this area, or at this game, at this sport, your aspirations when you first turned pro to where they are now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in. Well, where have they gone? Where are you in that, and how have they not been materialized, and where are you?
One of the ones, exactly the way you're speaking of there, that I think is a delicate balance for us as coaches is, I never want to limit the dreams and aspirations and belief of a player that I work with, because of the nature of becoming one of the best in the world is that, as you said, they'll be an irrational optimist. They'll believe they'll believe I can do whatever I want. I can be the best in the world at this. And I think sometimes it's hard with the balance where they have that belief, like, what do you mean? I'm as good as any other player. And right now you're not, but you could be. So sometimes you have the player that can accept where they are right now and still believe that this is possible. And then you have the player that is cranky and upset and annoyed and disgruntled because they're not where they think they should be. And that's
that's a huge one. I think it's interesting. Sometimes when you talk to players, and either amateurs or pros, and how quickly they can be sometimes to dismiss how good a player is or has the potential to be, and they'll make a rash judgment based on, he's never done this, or he's never done that, and sure, he's only on that tour, and he's only, this type of thing. And you're like, again, for me, that speaks as much to that person as the person that they're speaking about,
100%, yeah.
And I'm always that type of person to think, or maybe become, or trying to continue to become that kind of person who thinks, you're not your best version of yourself yet, and maybe there is no such thing, because when you get to where we think that is, you'll realize that more to go, you know. And there's even, but it's to create that. And again, values is such a nice word here, you know. What are your values? What are the things that you're prepared to, what are those things that will underpin your decisions about what you're going to do? And so often for me, that comes back down to that place where people are prepared to be challenged in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, make them sit in that kind of, oh, that doesn't feel nice. If you've gotten to that point where they're sitting uncomfortably, that's that critical point. That's the seminal moment on either, it's a tipping point. They're either going to go with you or they're going to fight against you. And they'll come up with and they'll be world class at coming up with reasons why they think your way isn't the way and this way. And they're like, well, hang on, it's not. You know, they'll make up whatever narrative they want so that they don't have to go into this uncomfortable place.
And do you let them go at that point, or what do you do?
No, like it again. I'm not. I don't know about me letting someone go. I've been dumped.
No, but I mean, like, if you know somebody's resisting you real hard and going, no, I'm not.
No.
Are you okay with going, well, you're probably just not the right player for the way that I like to do, or how do you?
I may have had that conversation, but I'm very slow to. I'm very slow to be the one to let go, because I suppose I have this. I'm an irrational optimist. I just believe that athletes, there's so much scope for people to get there. So I'd hate to make a rash judgment even after 2 years of trying. You know, that kind of way. So it's not that rash.
You'll always pitch up trying your best.
I'll always give them an opportunity to have that light bulb moment, because in all the years I'm coaching, it comes at different times for different people and in different ways, you know. And as I said though, but that doesn't mean that they have bolted for the door and be like, good luck.
Dave Allred is brutal with that the other day, Don. I think it was when you missed the chat. He says if you don't like it, deal with it. You're not going to improve unless you do it. And he's very, very straight to the point. No bullshit. He said you got to deal with it. You know, this is the zone you have to practice in because you struggle when you go into the course. And if you don't like that, you're not going to get better.
I think that the nice thing about the way you put it is, like, you're not going to bend your values or your principles to appease the ego or appease the destructive attitudes that a player might have. And I think that sometimes, like I spoke to you about this before, I think sometimes in golf and coaches coming up through the ranks, it's like they can let the reputation of a player and their position in the game influence what they bring to the session. And I know I'm hopeful. I think I've come full circle in that now. Because like you, I've been picked up and dumped a couple of times, and you grow a bit of a thicker skin. But
but instantly, and on that, because I think there's a few things. You know, this idea now, fear of missing out. You know, FOMO. I think there's one like FOLO, fear of losing out. You know, that's some coaches. Oh, I don't want to stop working with this athlete just in case they make it. You know, and I want to. And you're like, oh my God, it's not about you.
Yeah.
You know, but on that, for those people over the years, long before I even came back into golf, that have been like, okay, Ed, it's not me, it's you. I have, maybe I'm just a bit stupid or a ridiculously thick skin, but I've always, and still to this day, even for people now recently who've been like, yeah, this is just not for me kind of thing, I'll always like, that's no problem. But and look, everyone I have a chat, more than happy to. And I just think, and it might be for me to have a chat with them to guide or direct them towards somebody, you know, that kind of way. If it's not me, but it's to, I don't know. That irrational optimist. I love the idea, and maybe this is coming from my research, maybe from my own. I love the idea of just the human potential. And if sometimes, and as I said, it takes a little longer for some people to realize how good I can actually be. And if they don't get it a bit, unlike Dave Allred, if they don't get it quickly, I don't mind. I don't mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush for them. Because look, my God, man, I was a late bloomer, in everything in my life. I mean it. Good grief, I did things when people were like looking at me thinking, "Are you not a bit old to be trying this?" And I'm like, well, I never did before, you know. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a lovely.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. Thanks a million.
Not
Thank
at
you
all.
for your
Brilliant.
time.
Absolutely
Brilliant.
brilliant. Thanks a lot, Ed.
I said this to
Gent.
throw something at you. Nick Winkelman has a book. You were talking about the RFU earlier on. Nick Winkelman, he's a good mate of mine. He has a book coming out
I saw that.
today. The Language of Coaching. It's worth a look, lads. It's worth a look. Yeah, and just to anybody you know, and if you're showing this to anybody, this stuff, let them know. The Language of Coaching by Nick Winkelman. It will make a significant contribution to the coaching conversation, I believe. And I think it's available from today. It's already on Kindle and whatever else. And yeah, I just think I know how he works, and I know the work he's put into this book, but I also know it'll be really practical and applied. It will really help people connect better, you know. And so yeah, it's just one. As I said, the only reason I was on to him earlier on today, just about us for our webinar later on, that we're going to try and we give it a bit of a push, because I think it is worthy of a push out there.
I've had two people send me messages directly about it already, and one guy, Shane Ulrich, he's a physio and a sports chiropractor, and then I saw another guy send me a message about it as well. So I think the buzz is getting out about it already. But
that's good.
From Nick to Rick, I'll order it now before I'm stuck into Rick at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Listen, great to chat, lads.
Brilliant.